Thank you so much for joining Tenbound's Leadership and the Remote World Conference. I just have a couple of quick announcements. We just ask that you keep your mics muted during the session, and we encourage you to drop your questions in the Q&A tab. On the right-hand side here, there's a conversations box, and there's several different areas to utilize, but the Q&A is the spot for questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ellen Stafford from Vidyard on how to motivate a remote team and how to motivate a remote SDR team.
Thank you so much, Renee. Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Stafford, and thanks so much for joining this session here. I'm going to be talking about motivating remote SDR teams, and I'm really, really excited for this one. I know this is a hot topic for a lot of us. So a little bit of background on myself. I've been at Vidyard since 2014, and I'm sure like many of you, I started my career in SaaS as an inbound SDR. I spent 1 year following up on the leads from marketing, and then I spent 1 year as an outbound BDR doing cold calling and prospecting. I've now managed BDR teams for about 5 years, and I'm pretty bullish on the importance of this team to drive a company's growth. And I'm sure, like all of you, I recognize that this is one of the hardest roles in tech, and it's even harder when you're working remotely. But I know, from my own career and like from the people I work with, it makes such a big impact on an individual's career. I also wanted to share a little bit about Vidyard. If you aren't familiar, we're a video platform for business. We enable professionals to record, manage, share videos with their audiences, whether that be for sales, marketing, or internal communications. Video really is the next best thing to being there in person. So even if I didn't work at Vidyard, I wanted to talk about how it's been so valuable to keep our team engaged, keep them communicating with each other and staying connected and staying motivated. It is free, so a little plug here, go to vidyard.com/free to download it so you can get started leveraging it for working with your team. All right, so motivation, it's a big topic, of course. And as many of you on the call, I did work in an office until March of 2020, and I always had my SDR and BDR team really close to me. And I had to figure out how to make this shift to remote. So I want to share with you from my own experiences and from working with my peers, what it takes to motivate a team, and then what we did to adjust this in the remote world over the last year. So my goal is to really give you at least one action item to take back to your remote teams. I'm still learning myself with this, and I'm sure all of you have different tips and tricks that are working for you. Renee mentioned at the beginning, please post your questions in the Q&A. I'd also really like to use the chat as well. So there's a couple areas I'm going to call out to see if you have ideas that you can share, and I would love to have some conversation going as we're chatting through it. So I'm going to start with just the topic of motivation in general and some lessons learned that I learned a few years ago. So when I first started in teams, I never really gave motivation too much thought beyond just the surface level. I knew it was important, and I knew as a leader, I needed to motivate others and keep myself motivated. To me, it was really just making sure that things got done. I knew I needed to help my team hit their numbers, keep them engaged and happy, keep them in seats. I was probably watching the dashboard way too closely and constantly running spiffs to try to drive a specific type of outcome, sort of going through the motions and making sure things are getting done. It was a few years ago, my VP of sales gave me this book, Drive by Daniel Pink. It's called Drive, the Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And it really did change my outlook entirely on motivation, and it made it a lot easier for me to understand what I was doing and the impact that could have on the individuals I was working with. So I would suggest you read it, or he's got TED Talks on YouTube. I'm not going to spend time regurgitating all the lessons in this book, but I think there's some important things that will help kind of drive this conversation. And I know since taking these things away, it's made me a more motivating leader for my teams. So one of the main things that he talks about in this book is the two types of motivations. There's extrinsic and there's intrinsic motivation. And one is way more effective when motivating teams and motivating remote teams. So this will probably be a wrap for some people, but as I mentioned, I want to sort of set the stage here. So extrinsic is that idea of the carrot or the stick. Something external is motivating you to get something done. So in SDR, that might be commissions or spiffs or performance improvement plans. And based on the science and what Daniel Pink talks about, if an extrinsic motivator is the only thing pushing an SDR to do a specific something, it's not going to be super effective at producing a desired outcome, and it will likely only produce short-term changes in behavior. So if, as an example, if I want my team to book more meetings, I might run a spiff based on what I'm seeing on the dashboard. And over that 30 days that the spiff is running, I might slowly see people sort of lose the drive to get the winnings at the end of the spiff if they realize they're not the front runner. And then of course I reward the people at the top. And then after 30 days, we kind of go back to where we were before. So it's effective in some scenarios. It certainly can be useful in SDR, but when it's used alone, it's only going to really motivate short-term behaviors and really short-term results. Then there's intrinsic motivation. I hope you appreciate my clip art here throughout the presentation. So intrinsic is that idea of an inner drive that pushes you to complete a task. So they say in the book, and again, the science says that there's 3 main types of intrinsic motivators. That's autonomy. So the rep is trusted by their leader and they feel that they can take ownership of their tasks and their outcome. There's mastery. They're being challenged to learn new things. They always feel like they're learning and getting better. He talked about mastery being somewhere between boredom and anxiety. So making sure that they're healthy, they're challenged in a healthy way to keep getting better. And then purpose, the idea of understanding the impact that they make for themselves, for the team, for the company, whatever it might be. When an SDR is motivated this way, they'll be a lot more passionate about what they're doing. And in turn, they're going to have better and more long-lasting results. So in that same example, if I want more meetings for my team, instead of spiffing it and putting rewards behind it, I might challenge them to try a new prospecting tactic and keep getting better at it. I might communicate the impact that meeting will have, that new meeting that they book has on the company or their own personal development. So as I said, I wanted to sort of set the stage with that. Once I understood these differences, I felt like I could manage a lot more effectively with my team, and my team had a lot more passion and they were a lot more engaged. And this has become increasingly important in the remote world, making sure that they feel autonomous, that they can achieve mastery, and that they have a purpose in what they're doing. So let's talk now about keeping your remotes motivated through different types of team engagement. So typically our SDRs and our BDRs have individual quotas that they're working towards. I know some have team quotas, but they are responsible for getting individual outcomes in their role. But there are so many benefits to them being on a team. If any of you were SDRs and BDRs before, you know it can be a really big grind. And often these individuals are early in their careers in SaaS, and they need the support of a team to build confidence in what they're doing, to learn and develop and achieve different levels of mastery, and to remind them of the purpose of what they're doing after maybe they get rejected a few times, they get hung up on or get no responses. So we went from having all of our team together to, in my case, reps cold calling in their parents' mints or sitting at their kitchen tables over the last year. So really early on, we surveyed the team to say, like, what do you miss the most? And what do you feel like used to give you energy and keep you motivated as a team? And a lot of them said it's just that team dynamic. So we knew we needed a similar type of environment in a remote world. So it really starts with making sure you're building the right type of team and you have the right individuals on the team. We worked to ensure that the current team felt really supported during that transition and knew what would be required of them to be successful in the remote world. And when we were hiring new individuals, we changed up our hiring profile a little bit. In general, when we hire for SDRs and BDRs, we tend to hire for soft skills and potential rather than someone with experience. I try to hire for things that I can't teach an individual. And for a remote team, that means maybe more emphasis on individuals that show that they can take ownership of their outcomes. They have a really strong passion for learning and they'll take that on themselves. They have goals that they're working towards and they seem like really driven individuals. Maybe it's trustworthiness because they have a ton of autonomy, as I mentioned. So this is the first one I wanted to call out to the audience here. So I've listed a couple of things that they were always important to SDR and BDR, and I feel like they've become more important in this world. What else are you looking for when you're hiring? I see self-awareness. That's a really, really important one. Please share that with the group and different things that you've learned as you've built your team remotely. We then had to look at our culture a little bit differently. We had to think about what kinds of things we needed to instill in our team to keep them motivated, to accomplish tasks, to drive results while working from home. Accountability was always important to us, but since working remotely, we've probably emphasized it a lot more. It's really become a core value of the team. So what we do is we say, this is what we need from you. Here are the clear expectations. This is why it's important. Here's your purpose. Now take ownership of getting there, and I'm here to help you with whatever you need. So again, set expectation and allow flexibility in how an individual is going to get there. We made sure that the team felt thoroughly trusted and that they knew they could trust us. I know it sometimes can be tough to not know what your team is doing when you're used to having them in an office, but you really need to resist the urge to potentially micromanage the team. Don't check dashboards and maybe start freaking out because you see that a rep hasn't made a ton of calls, or you see that a rep is offline and you're like thinking maybe they're slacking. Working from home has not been an easy transition for a lot of people. So you really have to allow flexibility with how they work. And some advice I got early on in managing, and it applies super well to managing a remote team, is this idea of assume they have the best intentions. Always assume somebody has the best intentions, unless of course proven otherwise. And if something seems off in what is happening, just seek to understand what's going on with that individual, because there is nothing more unmotivating than feeling like you're being watched or you're not trusted by your team member. Work-life balance. I talked about flexibility. It makes it really hard for a lot of individuals to disconnect, especially if you don't have your own dedicated workspace, which is true for a lot of SDRs and BDRs. As I said, people are working from kitchen tables and things like that on our team. So make sure you exemplify work-life balance for your team. I try to make it a point to say, like, have a good weekend at the end of the week. I'd make sure I don't reach out to them off hours unless it's like super critical. I actually even use spiff budget on self-care expenses instead of using it towards like some internal promotion. So I really wanted to make sure that I'm supporting them to work effectively in this new environment. And then ultimately give them ownership. Managers can influence culture, but it's the team that owns it. So make sure you're collaborating with them. You're asking them, what's working, what's not working. We do things like stop, start, continues, surveys. Make sure they have a voice in defining the culture. So of course they have a purpose again, and that they have autonomy on the team. Next up with engaging your team is team communication. You can't assume that things are learned organically with a remote team. I tend to over communicate information just to make sure that everybody has the information that they need to succeed in their role. Immediately when we went remote, I don't know if anyone else felt this, but I was on Zoom calls all the time, whether that was at work or even in my personal life, just trying to stay connected with my network through Zoom calls. So we tried to make a communication strategy that was more flexible and included asynchronous updates, so we weren't like zoomed out, for example. So Vidyard's been a really effective tool for this. We use videos internally to do updates on executive information, on campaigns that we're about to launch. We're trying to avoid taking anybody off the phone to inform them. We can send out a video securely and understand if they've watched it and make sure that the message is being received. Our team meetings are now a lot more effective, and they're reserved for things that are best done as a group. So that might be different enablement sessions, talking about results and strategy. We also really wanted to make sure that our team didn't feel siloed away from the rest of the organization. And the company's done a lot to help us create a team-wide culture and keep everyone connected, but we wanted to do that on our team as well. So we'll do guest speakers with different members of the team. We'll have video updates from different members of the team. And again, really make sure that we stay connected back to the purpose of the overall organization and not just our team and booking meetings or whatever the goal might be. Then, of course, there's all the fun stuff that keeps a team engaged and motivated. It encourages them to build relationships remotely. Many of us are working with individuals that we've maybe never met before. So doing these sorts of things is important to encourage that trust and collaboration on the team. Team events, making sure you're being creative with it. You're not just doing Zoom happy hours all the time. I'm sure a lot of people have gotten creative with their team events over the last year. So please start to share in the chat different things you've done that have worked well for your team to create those connections. We've done virtual trivia or virtual escape room, things like that. Find unique ways to celebrate wins. So this is a screenshot from an internal Slack channel where it actually posts from Salesforce into our CRM system into Slack, where we can celebrate when a deal is qualified, different emoticons and things like that. Just making sure that you're celebrating wins in unique ways. Inside jokes, this is one we did fairly recently where the BDR team trolled the account executive team on a sales all hands call, wore a flannel just to see if anyone noticed. It was just kind of a fun way to feel a little bit more connected as a group. So what other things are you guys doing if you want to post that in the chat? So then, of course, the idea of investing in your team to keep them motivated. I want to share a few ideas here of things that we've invested in to make sure that they feel motivated. We give them the support and the resources to ensure that they can be successful in their role. Team enablement, this one is probably pretty obvious. It really aligns back to that idea of mastery on a team, where they feel motivated, so they're continuously getting better at what they do. We've always done Vidyard Sales Academy, but in a remote world, we've sort of changed it up to be more effective to our individual learning styles. So we do like a mix of virtual, self-guided resources. We leverage different topics that are role-specific, not role-specific. We actually work with some of our partner vendors where I will run a enablement session for their team, they'll run a session for our team. So you're constantly investing in different ways to teach your organization. Make sure that they have resources to own their own self-development and be resourceful. So we have a ton of content that our team can lean on if they ever need something to learn on their own. We try to promote personal development, of course. We have personal development benefits. We work to connect our individual people outside the company for mentorship. And of course, make sure you're investing in your own development. They'll show that you're trying to learn different things that you can teach back to the group as much as possible. So outside of team enablement, we've built a few programs that help motivate our team to take ownership again of their own personal development. I'll highlight one specific here that has been really effective for motivating remote teams. We did this before remote, but it's been really, really effective for remote teams. So the idea here was micro promotions. So for our typical tenure in SDR and BDR is maybe 12 months plus. So we were finding that reps would get to like 7 or 8 months and feel that they have achieved mastery, that they knew how to do the job and they were ready for this next thing. So we wanted to make sure they were always working towards something while in the role, and they always had new things that they could learn throughout their entire tenure. So the idea here is when someone starts on our team, they're an SDR1 or a BDR1, and they can move up to a senior BDR role by completing specific on the dashboard or off the dashboard tasks. A BDR1, for example, might be working towards hitting specific rep metrics or a certification on things like competitive talk tracks or objection handling. A BDR2 might attend a virtual event or mentor a new hire. And then a BDR3 or a senior BDR, we built out tracks for them based on where they want to go, whether that's AE or CSM, this or something other than that. So this program is entirely self-guided by the rep. The manager is there to be a facilitator. They'll sort of check in to see how things are going. As quickly as someone moves through this, it's completely up to the rep themselves and how much time they're dedicating to completing these tasks. So it really helps with their own self-motivation to know that they have ownership of their own progression through the role. Tech stack. You don't always think about this as a motivator, but I'm sure you've all had times where a tool or a process wasn't specific clear and it gets really disruptive. That could be incredibly demotivating. So really invest in the right type of tech stack that's going to support your team to work effectively in their role. Let them participate in it. There are a ton of tools that have come into the Vidyard tech stack by individuals, downloading a free app and it being effective for them to achieve their goals. So really let them participate and make sure they have ownership of the different things that they can leverage throughout their role. Implementing clear process too. It's pretty frustrating when you're like, I don't know how to do this thing, and you feel like you're maybe disrupting others to figure out how to do it. So make sure you have clear process and clear resources for them to leverage at home when they're working through a new process. And then show them, what you want them to follow and what they can have creativity over. The picture I have here is a Vidyard video, obviously, again, another plug here, but we want to make sure that they know, what the expectations are, what their targets are, but how you get there, like get creative leveraging video, write really individualized, personalized emails, and have fun with that. So we always want to encourage the ownership of that piece as well. And then tech stacks that can really help you as a manager work with your remote team and keep developing and mentoring them. Internally, we use Chorus for a ton of call coaching. We obviously use Slack and Vidyard. What other tools are you using as a manager that help you keep your team motivated and keep connected with your group? I would love to hear from everybody in the chat on that one here. So get me some ideas for my own team. So far I've tried to highlight some things that you can do to engage and support your entire team to motivate them in their role so that they can work autonomously, feel challenged, and have their own purpose in the role. Now I want to call out some important things to do with each rep to help them find the intrinsic motivators. So first and foremost, if you want to encourage intrinsic motivation, you really have to invest in the personal relationships that you have with your team. The more you know them and what their goals are and how they like to learn and what bothers them and what encourages them, the more effective you can be at tapping into their intrinsic motivators to help drive them towards specific goals. They should also know you really well. You want to make sure that this trust goes both ways so that they'll come to you when they need help and they feel really, really well supported. One thing I'll call out here is make sure that you ask tough questions to really get to some of those answers. You don't want to go with just the surface level answer. Like as an example, if you find out that a rep on your team is really, really motivated by money, you might assume that they want a bunch of extrinsic motivators around them. So they want spiffs and things like that. But if you dig and you do a bit of a discovery behind why they said money is important to them, you might find out that they actually have a goal of purchasing a car this year because they want to be a lot more autonomous from their family. So make sure that you're really digging in. It can be tough to get to know people this well over remote. So challenge yourself to ask those tough questions. It's not going to happen as organically as it might happen in an office where you're getting to know each other through different just chatter in the office. Like make sure that you're taking the time to really dig in with the individuals. This is a whole big topic. I won't go into too much more detail here, but I would really suggest another book here, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. This book's been really, really effective for my own management style. And it talks about investing in bringing your whole self to work and investing in those relationships so you can be really effective in your management and the feedback that you give to teams. So similar to the importance of team enablement, you want to know that you're motivating your individual reps with your one-on-one time that you're spending with them to develop them personally. Make sure you have regular one-on-ones in the calendar. I suggest weekly if you aren't already doing it. Make sure that you're not just going through the motions in these one-on-ones. Like have a plan. Don't just check and see how you're doing. Don't cancel them or move them around. It could be really, really demotivating for an individual if it feels like your manager isn't investing the time in you as well. So for us, we set the expectation that the agenda is shared. So I'll bring some items. This is their time, so they should be bringing some items each and every week. I share with them the results and the impact that they're making really, really frequently. I use this time to give and get feedback from individuals. And I always want to make sure that I'm coaching every chance I get with the individuals. Again, they know they can keep developing and achieve mastery. Sometimes it could be really tough, especially if you have a large team. I'm sure some of you have large teams. It could be really tough to come up with unique exercises for different reps that are at different levels of tenure when it comes to coaching. The micro promotions I mentioned earlier have been really effective for this to make sure that we can keep moving people forward in their progression. And sometimes you just have to do like general themes for your whole team, regardless of their tenure. So that could be everybody this week I'm call coaching you on OPERS or objection handling, or we're going to talk about a specific persona that we target and we're going to role play that. So that team-based theme coaching has been really effective for just my own time management when it comes to working with my reps. I want to mention praise and incentive too. So this is where that extrinsic motivation comes into play. Like I said earlier, these can drive results if they're used effectively or in certain scenarios. So if they're leveraged alone, they aren't always effective. But when they're leveraged while you're also promoting autonomy and mastery and purpose, they can be really encouraging and they can add a lot of excitement. So ask your team, how do you like to be praised? Ensure that you're tying that praise back to impact that they're making to the organization or to whatever it might be. Create a forum for peer-to-peer recognition. So it's not always you patting people on the back. They're encouraging each other, or you're encouraging them to praise each other when they're doing good things for each other. Encourage them to keep a kudos folder. This was actually something my SDR manager years ago suggested to me when I first got into tech. Every time I got kudos from an AE or a prospect or a manager, I would save it in a folder. And anytime I was feeling demotivated or I had a really bad day, someone hung up on me or whatever it was, I would tap back into this folder to remind myself why I was doing something. Use that kind of guide my own intrinsic motivation. So if you're not doing this with your team, that's a really great tip that I would take back. For spiffs or different types of rewards, use these where you might be trying to encourage shorter term impact. Like for example, if we have an upcoming event, we do spiffs to try to encourage as many attendees as possible. Have your team participate in spiffs as well. So make sure they are helping you to build out what it might be, or they're giving you input on the types of rewards that you're giving out. And don't just reward cash, I would say too. Have rewards like a coffee chat with an executive, or attend a virtual event, or represent us at some cross-functional meeting. So it's tying back to that idea of purpose as well. So last thing I wanted to touch on here is motivating managers. So there might be some people on the call who are leading leaders like I am today. So a lot of the same things apply when you're working with your managers. Don't want to just go through the motions. You really want to make sure that you're pushing autonomy and mastery and purpose with your individual managers as well. So with autonomy, give them ownership of their team. Don't ever go directly to the rep. Try to leverage your manager as effectively as you can. Give them ownership of the results they drive. Trust them and guide them, but hold them accountable and let them have autonomy of what they're doing with their own groups. Mastery, challenge them by giving them new opportunities to develop new skills. We use a lot of different technologies. So we have project leads for different parts of our tech stack. We had to redo some of our onboarding material. So one of our managers owned that project. One of our managers represents us at cross-functional meetings, as I mentioned. So give them opportunities to keep developing all the time and not just own their team, but what can they do in the organization as well. And purpose, make sure it's clear to them the impact that they're making on individuals, helping their reps get promoted, on the overall results of the company, for the department, all of that. So doing things like stop, start, continues is helpful here too. So if you're not always connected to your individual reps, you could hear from stop, start, continues with your HR team that's running it, different ways that you can keep coaching your manager so they can get better and better. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're at time here. I know I talked about a lot, but I really hope that everybody has, as I said, a couple items that they can take back to their team here. We have about 4 more minutes. So Renee, maybe you could help me with some questions that are in the Q&A chat here.
Yeah.
See what we can get to. And if there's anything we can't get to, Vidyard has a booth at the event as well that you guys can stop by, or of course, free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, just Ellen Stafford at Vidyard.
So one question I see here is, what do you recommend for building a program for very small BDR teams, max 5 people?
I think that micro promotion piece could also be really helpful. For us, there's actually raises that go through it, but maybe it doesn't make sense to do something that intense for a 5-person team. But maybe you do have milestones that you're creating throughout their tenure with 5 individuals that you can have them words. Another program that we did was Rookie Roundup. So our more tenured reps on the team led programs for our new reps on the team. So they completely owned it. It was management sponsored, but they owned it and ran it, and managers weren't allowed in those sessions. So doing things like that and giving them autonomy to motivate each other, that could be really helpful for a small team.
Awesome. And then another one is, how do you recommend to balance 12 reps to keep them motivated?
That themes coaching that I mentioned could be really, really effective. So always be coaching, making sure that you're giving back to them in terms of their own development. But it's tough with a really large team at different levels of tenure, as I mentioned, to have programs that will continually challenge them. So if you can come up with, I'm going to do call coaching this week, I'm going to do video coaching this week, you're always giving back to them in a training capacity. That's really, really helpful. And then make sure they have some kind of path that they're working towards. Maybe it's not micro promotions, but make sure they have connections to other parts of the organization. Like maybe it's giving them an AE mentor. Maybe it's connect them to a sales manager or a CSM manager. So really leveraging the resources that are around you in the company. So it's not only you, to make sure you're motivating those people. Use your connections internally.
And let's see here. We have a team of 30 SDR/EDRs. How do we balance and motivate?
Yeah, that's a big question. If you want to reach out to me individually for that one, I'm certainly happy to share some ideas of things that we've done. I think at the top, I've had 28 members of my team, so I probably have some things to learn from you too. So I would love to chat with you. Usually we try to do a 7 or 8 to 1 manager alignment, because 30 is really difficult to do. So if you don't already have managers, make sure you have team leads that you can rely on too. But again, I would love to connect with you individually to talk about that more, because I can learn from you as well.
And the last question I see here is, will this deck be shared with us? And I know we are recording all the sessions.
I'm happy to share it individually. I'm not sure the plan for the event, Renee, share content, but anyone that reaches out to me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to share it over.
Beautiful.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope, again, you took a couple things away, and feel free to connect with me and head to the Vidyard booth to learn a little bit more about what we're doing and how video can help you connect with your remote teams.
Great. Thanks so much, Ellen.
Thanks, everybody.
For us off today.